Well, the E91 is on hold until I can get the correct brake rotors. That's on hold until I'm done with pretty much everything else. So today I'm doing an oil change on my brother's 911, and I'm doing brakes on the Fiat because those are now metal to metal. But first things first, oil change on this car. He does shorter intervals on this thing just out of fear of the intermediate shaft bearing potentially being an issue. We don't think it will cause any problem. The engine was actually replaced by Porsche in 2011, so it shouldn't even really be prone to the IMS issue, but we're playing it safe. I'm even gonna do a Blackstone analysis on this, so I'm gonna pop it up in the air, pop the boot release, kind of show you where everything's at on this car, and I'm just gonna do an oil change on it real quick. So here we have the entire rear accessibility. Here's our oil filler, pretty straightforward. I'll leave that on so I don't lose it, and then dipstick obviously as well. So I've got the car all positioned to go up on the lift. Double entendre. Not an air cooled, and not a lot of people are a fan of the 996 styling. So I'm gonna go up in the air and show you where the oil filter is, and drain plug and all that fancy stuff. This car takes, I think, 9.5 quarts of oil, so it's gonna be a hefty oil change. Oh, weird, the engine's at the back. So here's the actual Porsche oil filter tool. You don't necessarily need this. The filter housing's right there. Sorry, it's a little dark. I'll turn my light on next time I take a video here. Drain plug's right here. Like that, it looks like it's an 8mm Allen. And this fits on just like that. I actually had to do this last time with a big channel lock because I didn't have this tool. That's not really a great solution because this is kind of brittle plastic after a long time, but step one is make sure you can loosen this before you drain the oil out of it, because otherwise you might be wasting a whole bunch of money. So if your last oil change was done correctly, you should be able to reach up and, with a little bit of force, I already cracked it loose, get this going. I did crack it loose with the tool, however, when you're putting these back together, they're O-ring seal. So typically, typically you only tighten them down finger tight and then maybe a quarter turn additionally. So you really don't need to crank these down. In fact, it's bad if you do. When we first got this car, it was so tight that I almost broke this plastic thing getting it off. So this filter still looks like brand new. So I'm expecting this oil analysis to come back squeaky clean. But in order to get that filter off, just pull the filter down and out. It clips on with some plastic onto the engine. So pull the filter off, and then while all that's dripping down, move your bucket so you can open the drain plug and get the crankcase oil out as well. So take that 8mm Allen out and it'll keep draining. That oil again is looking really, really good. Next up, take your new filter and get the O-ring out of the package and replace the one on here. Get your little hook pick and just work it up out of there. Once you've done that, press the new filter back onto the engine and hand tighten this back on. Once the oil's done draining, go ahead and replace the drain plug. Torque to, I think, 8 foot-pounds. You can do up to 15, no problem. So I have the new O-ring on and lubricated. New filter is pressed on. My hand's super oily now, so take your tool and just snug it down, and then that's all I would do. If you want to do a quarter turn beyond that, that's at your discretion, but I just snug it down. Remember to torque your drain plug, and then I'm going to set the car back down and fill it up. So dropped her back down, put 9.5 quarts into the boot. Now just time to fire it up. Porsche, so the key's on the left side. Good oil pressure. All right, sweet. I'm just gonna check it for leaks and move on to the Fiat. good. Well, the Porsche is done. Time for brake pads on the Fiat. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a Berlinetta in here now as well. That's pretty snazzy. It's not mine, but I love it. So, anywho, first step for me is just going to be popping the wheels off of this thing. I already have all new brake hardware, new brake fluid, kind of cheapo rotors, just because whatever, but we've got Hawk HPS 5.0s in the front, and I've got EBC yellow stuff for the back, so this thing should stop on a proverbial dime, even though it's already pretty good with factory ceramics in the front and EBC Ultimaxes in the back. These are the factory original pads at 41,000 miles on the front, which is astounding with how I drive, and the rears I changed out. You'd have to go look at my pad video that I did a while ago, but I changed out pretty early on, and they're now just worn out as well. So I'm starting to hear some metal on metal noises. It's definitely time. I've never even changed the brake fluid on this car before. So it's, like I said, it's time. So there you can see the two 7mm Allens I'm talking about. Just push them back until they're level with the rubber. Once the caliper comes off, literally just pull the pad out of the piston, and then this one will basically just fall off. Once you've done that, there's two 19mm bolts on the back of the carrier. Zip those out, and then at that point this carrier will come right off. Just set it aside, and we'll probably have to take a hammer to this rotor because it's been on for a while. So there's the carrier and its two bolts. It was a 19mm for sure. At this point, if you don't have the two securing nuts, give it a couple little whacks. Bam. At this point, take your wire brush and clean up this entire surface. Oh, sorry. Take your wire brush and clean up this entire surface. And then I'm just giving my wheel bearing a good check right here. Luckily, it still feels absolutely perfect, but this entire mating surface where it hits the new rotor, you want to clean that up as best you can. So on the front brakes, not much pad left on there. I'm going to start taking this anti-rattle clip out. I'm just going to pry kind of behind it and away at the same time to get it out of there. And then in each one of these rubber things on the back, there is an Allen. I'm not sure if I'll be able to show you, but you're going to want to loosen that until it backs the pin all the way out this way of the caliper carrier, and then the actual sliding portion of the caliper will come off, releasing the pads. Old and busted, new hotness. Before you do anything with these rotors, you do have to either take brake cleaner or even soapy water and a rag will work. They put a oil coating on these to keep them from rusting in shipment, and that really eats into brake pads, so you don't want that on there. So just rub it off on both sides, and avoid getting it too much in the middle, because these are not coated rotors, so they won't look pretty after a while. This part will start to rust on the inside. It's fine, but it's just kind of an aesthetic thing. But make sure you wipe down both friction surfaces fairly well with some soapy water. Now at this point, generally you'll thread those two little retainers back in. If you don't have those like me, just thread a lug bolt in so the rotor doesn't fly off. Next up, we're going to put the bracket back on behind it and torque the bolts down. I'm going to torque those down to probably 50 foot-pounds. I would look up the torque spec on your own. Don't take my word for it, but they need to be pretty tight, but not insane. I'd say up to maybe, I think 75 or 80 foot-pounds is probably okay if you want to be sure. Now before you slide the pointy pad back into the piston, grab yourself a C-clamp or a big channel lock and carefully push the piston back in. Once you've done that, pull your guide pins out and check them for any sort of contamination. If they look okay, you can put them back in. I highly recommend you grease them just a little bit with some molybdenum grease. Just a light coating, make sure they're sliding nice. This car was wearing perfectly evenly, so I am gonna still grease them before I throw it back together, but if you're looking good, you can maybe get away without it if you don't have grease. So push the piston back in, Then take your pad, slide that back into the piston, and then put the whole thing back together. Tighten down your 7mm Allen carriage bolts, slider pins, whatever, and then put your anti-rattle clip back in. And that's pretty much all there is to doing a front axle brake thing on this. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. I'm not going to show you because it's the same process, but I'll pick up again when I'm on the back wheel. Okay, so the rears, I actually already did a video on these, so feel free to refer to that. However, the calipers are a little bit different design. First off, make sure your parking brake is released. But there is a 13mm here, there's a 17 here. Most 17mm box wrenches will not fit on that, so I usually grab this whole thing with a vice grip and back the 13 out. Once you've done that, you'll be able to separate the slider portion of the caliper from the carrier, and then we'll be undoing these 2 bolts, which you really can't see in there, but I'll show you in a second. So here we have the slide portion of the caliper and the carrier. And these EBC Ultimax pads really don't look that bad. They're only about half worn actually, which is pretty impressive. That just goes to show how little brake load there is in the back of a Fiat 500. I'm saving those. If anybody wants some half-used EBC Ultimaxes, let me know. I can totally hook you up. Guide pins still feel pretty good. Still gonna grease them. This caliper piston you cannot push back in with the C-clamp. You actually have to turn it. You have to twist it. I believe it's clockwise to go back in. I'll have to check it. But you actually have to wind these pistons back in. So what I ended up doing last time, I think, was using a needle nose pliers and twisting it. But I digress. Next step is caliper carrier bolts. These look like they might even be 13mm. They are indeed, so go ahead and crack those loose and get the carrier off so we can do the rotor. So on the rear, you just smack the new pads right in, twist in your piston, throw the whole assembly on, put your bolts back in your guide pins, and you're good to go. It's actually pretty easy. Well, all 4 brakes are on now. It's time to flush out the old fluid. And it's not looking so hot, so I'm going to hook up my power bleeder to it, and I'm going to try to drain out as much of the old fluid as I can. And once I've drained it out pretty much entirely, I'm going to add a bottle of new fluid and then hook hoses up to the bleeders and push through until I see new fluid. The BMW DOT4 fluid I'm going to run in here is almost like a green color, so that'll kind of help us determine when the new fluid is through, which is nice. So I've got it all hooked up. And the hose I have won't fit on this bleeder, but I'm watching the color, and I'm already seeing a color shift on that fluid, so that's pretty good, but I'm definitely going to bleed it through a bit more, just to make sure that we're getting as much of the old DOT3 original 2013 fluid out of it. Let it bleed a little bit longer, close it up, and then do the other rear, and then the front right, then the front left. And then I'm probably going to do transmission fluid on this car tonight as well. Well, I ended up not doing the transmission fluid tonight. I don't have the right size Allen socket for the fill plug. The drain is a 10 mil or an 8 mil or something like that, but the fill is like a 14 or a 17. So put the under panel back on it, and I'll just do that another day when I do the light bar and the grill. But it has completely fresh brakes on all 4 corners now, which is going to be really, really nice. I'm excited to drive this thing. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty much it for tonight. I'm just going to pull some cars back in and pack it up. It's like 9-something o'clock, so either way, stay tuned for transmission service, and then finishing up that blue wagon pretty soon. After that, I think is Ferrari service, so should be a lot of fun. And I haven't forgotten about the wagon project. That's still happening. I'm just waiting on the mass airflow flange from Miller Performance, who is silent. So I can't drop that thing in until it's ready to run, and it's not ready to run until I get a part. So sorry for the delay. I really want to get going on that project as well, but I don't want to jump the gun and make a car that currently runs and drives just fine no longer run and drive for a long period of time. So yep, like I said, thanks for watching and stay tuned.